The world's richest 1% have more than twice as much wealth as 6.9 billion people. Just think about that. While almost half of humanity is living on less than $5.50 a day, the world's richest 1% have more than twice as much wealth as 6.9 billion people. While each year 100 million people are forced into extreme poverty due to healthcare costs, the world's richest 1% have more than twice as much wealth as 6.9 billion people. While each day 25,000 people, including more than 10,000 children, die from hunger and related causes, the world's richest 1% have more wealth than twice as much as 6.9 billion people. I hope it is clear that wealth inequality is not only rampant in the world, it defines the world. The world is owned by those who own capital. Not those who work all day every day, those who in simple terms can sit back and make more money from having money. Massive changes are required and we must start now. One of the first steps, in my opinion, is the implementation of a wealth tax. A wealth tax is different from other taxes in the sense that it is not on a transaction like VAT. A wealth tax is a tax on a person's holding of assets. So, for example, and one I would definitely not advocate for, let's say that there is a 5% wealth tax on wealth over €100, and the assets I have are a phone worth €200, AirPods worth 100, and 100 in cash. My total assets are worth €400, so I have €300 of wealth over the €100 threshold. So I get 5% of 300 and I have to pay €15 for the wealth tax. Even in countries with low Gini coefficient like my home country of Ireland, still have significant wealth inequality. The net worth of Irish households stands at €883 billion as of the end of the first quarter of 2021. The top 1% wealthiest here have 14.8% of wealth, which is $130.684 billion. The top 5% have 37.5% of wealth, which is $331.125 billion, and the top 10% have 53.8%, which is $475.054 billion. This is all while the bottom 50% have about 5% of wealth. There are various levels of wealth taxes that could be implemented here if we decide to go forward with them. A wealth tax could be, for example, taxing the top 1% wealthiest 1% on their household wealth over 1 million. If we take the 17,000 households making up 1% of the country, for a total of 1.7 million households, we have 1 million wealth tax-free per household, and you have 17 billion tax-free. We then take 17 billion from 130.684 billion, which is the wealth in the top 5%, and we have 113.684 billion to tax at 1%, which leaves us with just over 1.125 billion of government revenue. But this is a conservative and simplistic tax with only one tax band, and we could easily increase it and add more tax bands for even wealthier households, as although it is true that millionaires and billionaires have less of their wealth in money than the average person, they still have much of their wealth in the form of money. A slightly less conservative wealth tax might be a 2% tax on household wealth over 1 million in the top 5%. This wealth tax would create €4,922,500,000 of tax revenue. And that's not even taking into account even higher wealth tax bands, for example, a billionaire's tax. To put that number in perspective, it would cost 1.665 billion to make public transport completely free, implement universal primary care and universal free GP care, and create an additional 295 ICU beds to bring our number of ICU beds to the European average of 11.5 per 100,000 people. Now you might be thinking, this is great, with almost 5 billion quid we could invest in so many great and ambitious projects in Ireland. And that is true, and we should make the lives of working class people in this country better. But we should not just be focusing on our own country. That tangent was just to show that even a small fraction of the wealth of the wealthiest could be redistributed for the good of all of society. Imagine the amount that a wealth tax could generate in a more unequal, yet incredibly wealthy country like America. As I said at the start of the video, there is great global inequality. Ireland is a small country with relatively low wealth inequality in comparison to the rest of the world. But the thing about that is that there is relatively low wealth inequality within this country. It is imperative that wealthier nations help poorer nations develop sustainably. I do not mean this through predatory IMF loans, in which wealthier nations, the US predominantly, give loans in exchange for the country to effectively become a country ripe for the extraction of resources for Western profit, or at least a puppet state. I mean wealthier nations investing in actual sustainable infrastructure with tangible and material differences on the ground, with no coercion to follow business interests of the wealthier nations. And when I talk about this, obviously wealthier countries like the US or UK would be investing far more than Ireland. You might think that's not realistic. There will always be business interests. And in the current system, that is true. In order to achieve true global equality, we need to completely change the global economy from something based on perpetual growth, with most of that growth going to the wealthiest, to something based on equal opportunity and the needs of the human race and the planet as a whole. To those who say that a wealth tax is too far or not needed, a wealth tax is just part of the beginning. In the current economic system based on never-ending growth, to get every person in the world out of poverty, global GDP would need to be 175 times its current size. That's 175 times more extraction, production, and consumption than we're already doing. Even if this were possible, there is no way this can be done without causing significant ecological disasters. A new system is needed, and one, as I said, that is based on equal opportunity and the needs of the human race and the planet as a whole, rather than being based on perpetual growth.